barakah, a time of wisdom, a time of hidayah for all of us. One of the issues that we're facing today, and the reason why I mention this is because in the past week, a big portion of the conversations that I had was people, and naturally so, are feeling because of political climates, because of the way culture in which direction is moving, the way popular culture is moving, people are starting to feel hopeless, and it seems to be that before thinking of all the options that we've been given, as Muslims especially, and just practically, just to shed a little light on that, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. A brother that I had spoken to today, individuals I've spoken to yesterday, the day before that, what should we do about our children? The school system that they're in right now has expectations of them to adhere to this new agenda of the LGBTQ community and to address people by certain pronouns and, drag queen story hour in libraries, and I feel like I should move out of the country. That's one option that people usually say, right? The fitna is getting too much. I want to move to the southern states. The southern states because they happen to be more conservative, related to more family-oriented and conservative values that Muslims hold. The other is that I want to seclude my family and I just want all my children to homeschool, right? There's so many different options and people that they're concerned of. Can we, at our workplace, just celebrate, whatever celebration's happening regarding this lifestyle of the LGBTQ lifestyle, or any other lifestyle for that matter, just so we're not scrutinized and we don't get fired, or whatever the case is. All of these. There's many, many more, right? The issue at hand is not when a calamity befalls us, especially in matters of our iman, and things that are directly against the teachings of Allah and His Rasul, we don't flee automatically. It's a test from Allah and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once we get comfortable, there's many different levels of tests. Sometimes we get really comfortable with something and then Allah tests us, right? Is the answer that I migrate somewhere else, that I migrate to southern states? That's just one idea that people have. Or I go to another country. You can actually, number one, you can do whatever you want to do as long as it's halal. But is the answer to teach my children that as soon as these things happen that we're going to run away? And I don't mean run away in a condescending manner, but we're trying to escape this problem, so we're going to go somewhere else. Or do we stay with our children, teach them what Islam teaches them, and help them stay strong, right? Fitnas have always occurred in the Muslim Ummah. Is this the first time that the Muslim Ummah has been faced with any fitna? No, these fitnas come and go. And sometimes they never go away. But are Muslims the type of people that teach their children to just run and not turn back? Because wherever they go, the fitna is going to be there, right? If you claim, now look at the other fitna. We see a lot of Muslims now where they're, claiming that the conservatives of the country are siding with Muslims, and if they are, that's only temporary. It's happened before. They're not going to side with you forever. They just need more numbers. That's all it is to go against the liberals. It's all a war. And they're trying to use Muslims now because we share some values of family and whatever the case is, but let's not forget, deep down, a lot of the conservatives would, if they had the option, they would eliminate Muslims because of their belief in La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. They hate the fact that we don't think that Jesus is God. They hate the fact that Muhammad is the final messenger. And they hate the fact that we claim Isa alayhi salam in our own book and we refer to him as a prophet and all the values that we bring. But for this small moment of time, especially during elections, they want to utilize the Muslims. So moving to a southern state or siding with conservatives for this small period of time, Muslims shouldn't get excited. the test of a believer is going to be there all the time. One of the best ways to help get over the sad, in sorrow state of Muslims is get together with other Muslims, no matter what belief that they have, right? And I'm talking about within Sunni Islam. Whatever belief they have, and join hands with other Muslims and become united, and other fiqhi disagreements that we have, put those aside because they're only in fiqh, they're not matters in aqidah. Do you go to another masjid and says that there's two Allahs, wal-'iyadhu billah, wal-hasha lillah? No masjid, from what I understand, exists that way because it wouldn't be Muslim. Is there any other masjid that you go to that says Muhammad ﷺ is not the final messenger? If they do, then they're not a real masjid. Do they say that they don't believe in Jannah and Jahannam and the angels and the books and Qadr, khayrihi wa sharrihi? They don't. We all believe actually the same thing. And we all obviously all believe that the Sahaba are the best of generations and we don't curse the Sahaba, right? Nobody from the normative idea of Sunni Islam doesn't believe that. So everybody in the realm of Sunni Islam, what we actually have to do to get over this, number one, is come together and have an open conversation and say, look, the other side is not going to discriminate who is a Sufi and who's a Salafi and who's from Jamaat Tabligh and who's from Jamaat Islami. They're not going to discriminate. Whatever they see Muslim, that's who their target is. But for us, as Muslims, it doesn't matter to what group you belong to. We're all Muslims, and if we don't unite now, then they're going to see how disunited these groups make Muslims, and they're going to divide and conquer the same way they divide and conquered India and made India and Pakistan and the Muslim world, and how Britain and France and Italy divided and conquered. They're going to do the same thing with us here locally, and that's what they're doing now. But I'm not going to say that, oh, if we unite, everything is going to become easy. No, there's no such thing for a believer as everything is going to become easy. I'm just letting us know our expectations of this dunya as believing Muslims and Muslimas. Don't ever think for 1 second that if you follow everything Allah and His Rasul tell you, all of a sudden overnight life is going to become easy and no one's going to bother you. That's not true. Rather, in our experiences, we've probably seen, in my own experience, I have seen Muslims when I was in high school, that was a long time ago, but even recently, one of the Muslims, whether it's a brother or a sister in the family, tries to practice Islam a little more diligently or much more diligently than the rest of the family, right? The first people actually to attack the practicing Muslim are usually Muslims. They're not non-Muslims. In this story we see all the time. From when I was growing up, I knew of a sister who was a friend of who was a biological sister of one of my close friends, who in high school she started wearing hijab. No one else in her family wore hijab. And then she started wearing a jilbab. The first people to attack her were her family. Her own parents, you know what they said to her? They said, who's going to marry you if you look like a peasant? A peasant is like a beggar, right? You know? Now, what do you think that does for the iman of a girl who's in 10th grade or 11th grade? The own parents who are supposed to be the number one support system, and I'm not blaming parents for this, I'm making a point that the first people to attack each other are Muslims, right? They see a brother who was not really practicing, all of a sudden he starts practicing, comes to the masjid more, he grows his beard out, you know, he's more at the masjid more often, right? And what do we hear from our community, right? Oh, he's becoming a mullah now, look at him, he thinks he's better than all of us. No, that's not true. He's just doing what Allah asked him to do. He never said he feels that he's better than you. He actually probably feels, if he's practicing Islam properly, he feels that his iman is the lowest iman in any room that he goes into. And the reason why he helps and corrects people is not because he thinks he's better than you, is because he has to stand in front of Allah, and Allah is going to say to him, you saw this happening, what did you do to stop it? Did you use your hand? Did you use your tongue? Did you hold it in your heart? Right? So that brings us to our next point. If one of our brothers and sisters, especially in a time like this, is correcting us of something, whether the style is good or not good, whether they were very friendly or they weren't friendly, are they speaking the truth? And if they are speaking the truth, and they're giving us what Allah is asking us to do, we have to accept it. We can't use that as an excuse in front of Allah. Oh, he was mean to me, so I didn't accept what your truth was, Ya Allah. Even though the truth should always come with beauty and grace and rahmah, of course. It's the prophetic way. So one thing we have to take into consideration is not everybody's Rasulullah ﷺ and nobody's Rasulullah ﷺ. And nobody's going to be at the generation of the Sahaba. So the hikmah that Muhammad ﷺ used in correcting people sometimes is not always going to be the best or most palatable thing. And why am I saying this? And the last thing I'll say, and we'll get into the questions, inshallah. Another very valuable point is in the past 5 to 7 years, we've lived in a culture of, the phrase, you can't judge me. No one can judge me. Who are you to judge me? And that it's a very loose term. You can't judge me. But just because a Muslim brother or sister is helping you do something better in Islam, or if they see an open haram and they're trying to stop you from doing haram, it doesn't mean that they're judging you. That doesn't mean they're saying, hey, this person's a bad Muslim. You're a bad Muslim, which is why I'm correcting you. No, they're saying that even if I was doing something haram, I better hope that you were to correct me, because if I continue doing something wrong, I'm continuously doing something haram, and Allah is going to ask you, my brother, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, why didn't you help me? And both of us are going to be in trouble. Rather, what's supposed to happen is that I'm helping a Muslim brother do something correctly, or if something haram is happening, because I don't want to stand in front of Allah and Allah's judgment, which is a real judgment, to say that person continued doing haram, and all these people learned from that one person. Thousands of people, just from watching that one person, were doing haram, and it was you that saw it happen, and you could have stopped it in its tracks. And because you didn't stop that haram, thousands of people did haram. So do you see that the person that's correcting the other person as a Muslim, it's not because they think that they're better. It's not because they're judging them. They're only afraid of the judgment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So that's something that we actually have to be very, very cognizant of and very, very careful of. Around this, do we have any comments or questions before we get into the questions that we have online, inshallah? Or even comments. Maybe I missed something. Maybe it's something worth mentioning. Right?
So I got a question.
Yes, sir.
You know how you were saying, like, when somebody tells you something, take it as, it's the word from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they're educating you, no matter what way they tell you.
Yes.
But there's if you're not as educated and you don't know, because a lot of people are opinionated and how they see it compared to what is it written in the Quran. So if you're not educated, like, how do you go about? You just research on what they're saying?
Very good. A very, very easy thing that our deen showed us is the concept of scholarship and imama, right? Imama meaning somebody who's the imam of the masjid, somebody who's a learned person, in whatever masjid that you go to. If somebody comes to you, for instance, and says, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. If they say, for instance, hey, you can't pray this prayer at this time, for instance. Then you say, oh, thank you very much for the advice, Jazakallah khairan. That's it, alhamdulillah. Now, if you want to know more about it, the first readily person accessible to you of knowledge is a person that you ask. You're a person of knowledge, you're a trusted person of knowledge. For instance, in any masjid, you're the resident scholar, you're the alim here, you're the mufti here, whatever the case is. You would ask them, this person corrected me of this. How do I go about this? Was I doing something incorrect, right? And that's just as simple as that. The issue is with doing your own research. I'm not stopping people from doing their own research. But what tools has somebody acquired in speciality in Islamic jurisprudence and Islamic scholarship to go even approach proper research, right? So there's a concept of research. Researching, for instance, on a very simple level, Googling something, right? It became a verb, Googling, right? Or whatever the case is, right? I Googled it, right? Is your research or is my research going to be as simple as that? If that's the case, that means that I'm not prepared to do my own research in Islam, right? Is my research that, for instance, I've done many years and I have ijazah in Islamic scholarship, and I'm not sure about something, so I have to go research to remind myself of something that I learned with the evidences? That's a different type of, right? So the easiest thing for the layperson who's not a specialist in Islam is just to ask somebody of knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلِ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Right? Ask the people of dhikr, meaning the people of knowledge if you don't know. And that's all the layperson who's not a specialist, that's all he's expected from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you don't know, oh, let me just ask that person that's more learned than me or that's considered a learned person. Do you understand what I'm saying? Jazakumullah.
Does it vary, like some follow the Hanafi way, some follow the Shafi way?
You're very good. No, that's a great question. So what keeps it very, very simple is that if you're already studying a madhab, you're involved in seeking knowledge. You're studying the Maliki madhab, you're studying the Hanbali madhab, you're studying the Shafi'i madhab under the tutelage of a scholar and a teacher, right? Then you have somebody that you can ask. That's a beautiful thing about being a student, that you have a teacher that you can ask all the time, right? Let's say your teacher is not available, and let's say you're studying the fiqh of Imam Malik, for instance, right? And your teacher is not available, then you would ask, somebody that you know is Maliki. If not, then you would ask somebody who's just a person of knowledge, and then whatever they tell you, you would follow. And after your teacher returns, you can discuss it with your teacher, right? The reason why I'm saying that is the maxim that we have in the Sharia, that the lay person doesn't actually have a madhab. Al-ammi la madhab lahu. What does that mean though? It means that the person, wherever he goes, wherever she goes, let's say I'm traveling, let's say you're traveling and you're going through Louisiana, right? And you're in a masjid in Louisiana, and you're not sure about something and you haven't learned something in fiqh, even if you have a teacher, you haven't learned something in fiqh on combining the prayers or the sunnah prayers while you're traveling. Are you supposed to pray sunnah? You're not supposed to pray sunnah. And there happens to be imam there who's a learned person, who's a resident scholar of the masjid in some masjid in Louisiana. I don't know the names of any masjids in Louisiana. You go and you ask him, hey, listen, I'm traveling and I prayed Maghrib and I'm traveling. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to pray sunnah or if I'm not supposed to pray sunnah. What should I do? And if he tells you, yeah, it's good to pray sunnah, you don't have to, but it's good if you do. Let's say he says that to you.
Okay.
So that's what you follow because he's a learned person, and me and yourself, somebody who is a lay person in the deen, that's who we ask, somebody of knowledge, because Allah says, ask the people of knowledge. That's what it means by the lay person actually doesn't have a madhab, because they're not a specialist in the madhab. They haven't gone through tutelage and seeking knowledge and received a degree, for instance, or an ijazah in any specific school of thought. You know what I'm saying? So wherever we go, we just ask somebody of knowledge. Somebody is preferably from the masjid. We just ask, right? That's why people who are just traveling, sometimes they come to the masjid and they want to sit with the resident scholar of the masjid and ask questions. And, I'm only here for a few hours, but I have a few questions because I'm traveling, whatever the case is, right? I hope I answered your question. Jazakallah khairan. Yes, sir.
What is the difference between Zabiya and Zabiya Halal?
MashaAllah. You've asked a question that possibly will, I appreciate the question, it's a great question, will probably never be resolved until the Day of Judgment, but it's a great question. So, the original understanding in Islam is that if something is halal, if something is dhabiha, then it's halal. For classification of certifications that we have currently, there's a differentiation between halal and dhabiha halal because of certification reasons. That's a contemporary thing that didn't exist in the past. In the past, Islamically, we didn't have to ask somebody, is this dhabiha or is this not dhabiha? It was just considered halal, But, so the term of dhabiha halal is for certification purposes of, meat distributors that certify certain stores and restaurants to understand what level of Islamicness, in their opinion, is the meat that they're eating, right? I don't want to get too philosophical, so I apologize. But to some individuals, according to them, their scholarly opinions, they believe that since the United States was founded on Christian values, Judeo-Christian values, and the forefathers of the United States were from the Judeo-Christian faith, that any meat that is distributed from this country is considered halal as long as you say Bismillah and you eat the food, right? Then there's another scholarly difference of opinion regarding that there has to be, number one, iraqatud dam, as the hadith mentions, there has to be the flowing of the blood. And the Christians and the Jews used to actually sacrifice the animals and used to mention Allah's name in it, right? Irrespective if there were Christians and Jews, because the Quran didn't differentiate, but they actually used to, the Christians and the Jews used to mention God's name, Allah's name, and they used to actually do iraqatud dam, cut the neck of the animal the way we see Muslims actually cut it now. So that's where the difference of opinion is. So when you say it's halal, meaning that it's not pork and it's some food from the Ahl Kitab that you can eat, which is meat, it's not from mushrikeen. And that's just a general standard of halal. But for certification purposes, dhabiha halal actually means that you've seen that they have approval of it being hand slaughtered, that it's not machine slaughtered, that the person that was cutting it said Bismillah and cut it, the person was a Muslim. And so that's what dhabiha halal actually means. It's actually a little more stringent than just a halal certification. That's why those classifications are there, right? And the reason why I said, this argument is not going to finish, or this difference of opinion is not going to end until the Yawm al-Qiyamah, is people are always going to be discussing this. The more people move into the West and the more we don't have a governing body like Muslim countries do. The Muslim country doesn't have Muslim countries have a governing body that does everything for the Muslims. They do citations on the moon, so everybody does it accordingly. In the United States, we have many different Muslim organizations which follow a different fiqh methodology, which observe the moon and have different conditions, which still doesn't mean that we're disunited in Islam. There's actually nothing wrong with having 2 separate days of Eid in Islam. It doesn't mean we're disunited. It just means we have a difference of opinion. That's it. But we're still Muslim. That doesn't matter. It doesn't mean we're disunited. But the advantage of Muslim countries is that you have the mufti of the country that has his own cabinet and internal affairs of Islam, Islamic internal affairs, Islamic affairs, even specific affairs just for Ramadan and citing the moon. So the beautiful thing about living in a Muslim majority country is the Muslim government takes care of all of that for you and makes sure the ingredients and all of the food is taken care of, sacrificed Islamically. So the Muslim country, you don't really have to worry about that, for the most part.
I came from Oman. They are importing meat from Australia, from Brazil,
Yeah.
Saudi and
Yeah.
they are cutting goats. It's a lawful slaughter. Lawful as per Islamic.
Yes.
And they are playing some recording. Say, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, Bismillah. By loudspeaker are recording. And by this thing, machine which is
Machine slaughter.
a machine slaughter.
Yeah.
That is halal. This is halal.
So I personally, I don't know what method they follow, Brazil and Australia, and how they certify something to be halal. To be honest with you, I haven't researched how they do it. I wish I did. I haven't researched it. I don't know how they do it. But obviously the Islamic practice is, that you don't play a recording in a machine slaughters, right? There has to be pronouncement of the name of Allah and the sacrificing of the animal according to Sharia standards. But I don't know what they actually follow. I know that they have distributors which are halal, right, in dhabiha, but I don't know what they follow, to be honest with you. Yeah. Jazakallahu khairan.
But here is some people they are facing this certificate. Zabiya halal. Somebody said no, this is Zabiya.
Yeah.
I don't know what is the difference.
Yeah, so generally what they should be saying is anything that's dhabiha is halal anyway. Yeah, so I don't know why they do that. Maybe they just, because of a certification, because of specific certification that says, do you need two certifications, one that says halal, one zabiha? I don't know how that works. Wallahu alam.
Should be only one thing. Zabiha should be the
It should be halal if it's zabiha. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I don't know the intricacies of how those contracts and those certifications work, so I don't know,
Sorry, are there sisters in the back hearing the question and answer?
Yes, yes. No, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yes, mashallah.
Can I,
Of course,
can I add something onto that?
of course.
So, okay, so this is like how the brother was saying, and mashallah, how you answered it. This issue of zabiha and halal, this has been in our community as it's like a gray area. There's a black area, and then there's a white area, and then there's a gray area. I'm not a scholar as far as yet complete, but this is what I have experienced, and from whatever I understand, there are some areas where this knowledge isn't shed upon, due justice isn't done on this very topic.
Yes.
And there's a lot of stuff like I think, I know, I heard, this type of stuff. Like in Urdu, we call it qila wa qala, he said, she said. So this is something, and of course, even within the scholars, there is ikhtilaf. There is in some matters, there is ikhtilaf. But I think in matters of, if the food area is also handled by Imam Shafi'i, Imam Hanbali, Imam Maliki, and Imam Hanafi, then if they have different sayings regarding this from the hadith, then there may be some differences of opinion, like how in many other ibadah there is. But as far as the basic, what is halal and haram, we can just go straight to the lughat of the very word, what it means. Halal is permissible and haram is impermissible.
Yeah.
So that's we have that right there, a clear-cut answer. And then the word zabiha is also an Arabic word. We just know what that word literally means, and then how do they both apply and work together? And then, like, things can be halal, but they cannot be zabiha. But then when there's zabiha, when we say it's zabiha, it's already understood that it is halal.
Yeah.
Because you cannot do zabiha to a pork, to a pig, because the animal itself. So meaning it's a first requirement, and then you have a secondary requirement. The very first basic requirement, preliminary prerequisite, is that it has to be halal to be even edible to start with.
Yeah.
To be, to cut the neck and the two jugular veins and spill all the blood out, right? Because in the Quran you cannot eat things which are blood.
Yeah.
Dam, because if you have blood in the animal, then
Yeah.
you have a halal animal with blood. So
حرم عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير. Yeah.
the ayat of the Quran. So I feel like, okay, so the many countries like Australia, New Zealand, and Saudi, we have people that come there for Hajj and Umrah, and then there's this thing that it's a Muslim country. Like we went there, we think everything is halal, but then there's brothers who are local that said that, oh, you cannot go to XYZ restaurant because their meat is outsourced from New Zealand, Brazil, Australia. But then if there's a halal body down there that's actually making sure these requisites are taken care of,
Yeah.
then it's fine if they import it because they don't have that type of supply available to take care of 2 million pilgrims who are coming for Hajj and Umrah. Where are they going to get all
Yeah,
that
they
source?
actually have a website. I mean, now that I'm remembering, I think Australia, New Zealand, they do actually have a website from their Ministry of Islamic Affairs. There's for their approval of the way they sacrifice animals. But just to add to what you're saying, I think it's a really really important of what you said, the differentiation between not everything is halal, but not something can you can't sacrifice pork
Right,
and
you
say.
can't. You
But
can't
the
just-
other thing is that sometimes you have to understand that dhabiha is only limited to livestock, right? That word, it
Right.
literally means
It's
sacrifice,
a living
right?
animal.
Yeah.
You can't zabiha a carrot or a celery and carrot and cucumber. You can't zabiha it because it's already because it's not a living.
This is a great
animal.
conversation.
You're literally taking a life out of an animal, so it has to be done in a non-cruel manner,
Yeah.
such a way that's humane for the animal.
Yeah, and prescribed in the Sharia, of
Prescribed.
course. Yeah. But I think,
That's the whole issue. That's where I guess that's where it stems from.
yes,
You
sir.
can't just smash the head or chop the head off or stun gun them or electrocute them.
Yeah. No, and I think it's something that's worth mentioning is, you mentioned stun gun and like shooting it in the head and, with whatever
Stuff
means.
happens.
No, it does happen. It's very, so the dilemma, I mean, this is the last thing I'll say, and I think we should probably move on, inshallah, because this conversation can, inshallah, go on for a long time. But So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, حرم عليك حرم عليكم الميتة حرم عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made haram for you ad-dam, al-mayta, dead carcasses, something that's dead animals. Meaning that, let's say you're out somewhere and you see a dead animal, you see roadkill and it's a deer. It's already dead. You're not allowed to eat that, it's haram. Or dam, and you're not allowed to just drink blood. Like you can't take a cup of blood of an animal and drink it, right? And lahm al-khinzir, right? And the flesh and the meat of a swine, of a pig. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse, and there's another verse in the Quran, almost the same exact structure, linguistically, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is putting all of these in a similar category. Eating dead animals, drinking blood, and pork. The dilemma with slaughterhouses in the United States and a big part of the West, United Kingdom, Western countries, is that there's no guarantee that by the time they come to the animal and they start chopping it up, that if it's already dead or not from the way they stunned it or the way they shot it or the way they killed it, right? There's no guarantee. And it's impossible in mass production to actually keep track of that, right? So it's very difficult. If you go to any slaughterhouse that's a non-Muslim slaughterhouse, just a general slaughterhouse who distributes to any store, any restaurant, depending on who their distributor is. But for the majority of the United States, if there isn't a Muslim slaughterhouse, there's no way of knowing if the animal was dead or alive because of mass production. So Muslims actually, coming to the point of classification you were mentioning about dhabiha and halal, are you even allowed to say Bismillah before you eat a dead animal that's been already killed? Before they cut up the carcass and before they distributed it? If it's already dead, there's no way of knowing if it's actually, so are you even allowed to say Bismillah? Are you allowed to say Bismillah before you eat pork? No. Are you allowed to say Bismillah and drink blood? Are you allowed to say Bismillah and eat a dead animal? No, you're not allowed to. And that's the dilemma that we have now in the Muslim, in the slaughterhouse industry, is that we don't know if the animal is actually dead. So are you even allowed to say Bismillah before you eat meat that's not sacrificed according to the Sharia, right? It becomes a very big problem. And that's why these halal dhabiha wars are still continuing. Unfortunately, Allah protect us and our progeny and help us consume not just halal but tayyib. The next portion is that Allah doesn't expect us only to consume which is halal but also which is tayyib. Tayyib means it's something that's pure, something that is according to the standards of Islam, right? And we can get into that later, inshallah, because I have more questions pouring in. So the first question is, here, this is just refreshing, I'm sorry. What is the ruling behind backbiting celebrities? What is the ruling behind backbiting celebrities? And what about scholars and sheikhs that speak publicly and celebrity Muslims? I think it's a great question because the person is concerned about ghiba and not backbiting. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us and our tongues from backbiting. Jazakallah khairan, man. You don't have to do that. Allah preserve you and your family. Thank you. So we should be very concerned. Now, the first thing is just to understand what constitutes backbiting and what isn't backbiting and what is considered halal. We're not going to say dhabiha. What is halal but may seem to look like it's backbiting. Very, very important. Backbiting is anything or ghiba, which Allah mentioned in the Quran in Surah Al-Hujurat. Backbiting is anything that your brother or sister doesn't like what you say about them. And Allah gives us different classifications in Surah Al-Hujurat, right? He said, وَلَا تَنَابَزُوا بِالْأَلْقَابِ, right? Don't give people names that they don't like, nicknames. You know what I'm saying? I have a big nose, and if I do, someone says, hey, did you see big nose? Right? And I don't like people making fun of my big nose. I don't mind if you guys make fun of my big nose. I'm just saying in general, right? And Allah forgive all of you, even if you say that about me. But we don't give each other al-laqab or al-qab, right? And we don't deride people, say something about them when they're not present. That's going to hurt their feelings and something they don't like. So that's generally backbiting, right? Or something that they were doing in private and you went and started telling everybody, right? Well, you should have, if you saw them doing something in private, you just say, brother, I saw you doing this, just Allah forgive me and Allah forgive you, just don't do this anymore. Instead, you go and you start telling people, hey, I saw that person privately doing something. You know why? Because someone is doing something privately, that's between them and Allah. If someone's doing something openly haram, you obviously go and you correct them and you help them, right? But if someone's doing something privately, that's between them and Allah. Or if someone does something privately, that's between them and Allah, right? The other is that what seems to be backbiting but is not backbiting, which is actually can be an obligation. I'll give you a small example, right? This brother here has a daughter, right? And I know that family very well, right? And I know the other family that wants to propose to that person's daughter. Now, let's say that I know the boy that's going to be marrying that daughter. He's a violent person. He's a drug dealer. He's all of this and all of that. And the father of the daughter comes to me and says, hey, this boy proposed to me. What do you know about the boy? I'm not going to get into details. I'm just going to say, if that was my daughter, I wouldn't marry into that. I wouldn't have her marry that boy. You just leave it at that. And you tell them, do istikhara, please. Because we don't do istikhara only during weddings. It should be all the time. We do istikhara thumma al-istishara. That we do mashwara of people after we do istikhara because the haqq and the truth can roll off of their tongue of what Allah wants for us, right? The other is, so that's if somebody's asking about somebody's reputation. Reporting somebody, for instance, to the authorities, if somebody's doing something illegal or something dangerous, it's not backbiting if you go and tell the authorities, hey, this person has a gun and they're going to kill somebody. Oh, no, that's backbiting. I'm not going to tell on them. No, you have to, for the safety of people, right? Or if somebody's involved in some behavior which is self-destructive or harmful to others, and you yourself don't have the power to do something, you have to get somebody involved to do what's better for the community. And we also know about this from the scholars of the hadith, scholars of the science of hadith, and those who, how do they dictate whether something is sahih or da'if, right? Or da'if. They actually know by talking about the biography of the person, right? So they would say, for instance, this person is the narrator of this hadith. Don't take this hadith from this person because he was known to have a weak memory. There's no longer backbiting here, even though it outwardly seems backbiting, because it's for preservation of the deen, right? And we see this in hadith scholarship very, very often. Even Abu Dawood, right? Even look at Umar radiallahu an. Umar radiallahu an, when he was on his deathbed, and they came to him and said that we're choosing a selection of 6 people. Umar radiallahu anh said, choose 6 people to elect the next Khalifa. Don't let my son be amongst those people. My son is not going to be a candidate or somebody who's electing a new Khalifa. My son has nothing to do with that. I don't want you from amongst him, right? And scholars of hadith also, whose children or sons also narrated or knew of hadith, they said, don't take hadith from my son because he's weak of memory or he conflicts in his narration, right? So that's not considered backbiting. You guys understand what I'm referring to, right? So now comes, since we understand that generally, what does it mean now backbiting celebrities? Are they Muslim? Are they not Muslim, right? But it's not considered backbiting if there is somebody, whether they're a scholar, whether they're not a scholar, whether they're doing something Islamically in the public or they're doing something un-Islamic in the public. We talk about the action that that individual is doing, and if that person is promoting an action, whether it's political or not political. How many people do we know, and I'm not going to mention any names, but you guys can fill in the blanks, that are Muslims, but they're a part of some political allegiance, and they're a part of, for instance, they promote the LGBT community in their political power that they have. We see them in, trans marches and LGBTQ marches and all that kind of stuff. And, you guys are too nice, man. Thank you. That we can call out and we say, look, as a Muslim elected official, this is not something that they should be involved in as in Islam. And we as Muslims don't follow these things, and we don't go to these parades, and we don't go to these marches because it's outright haram because Allah said so, right? To that capacity, right? We don't go into talking about that person and their history and, talk about their families and all. We don't do that, right? What we do is if this person's representing Muslims, whether they say they're not representing Muslims or not, too bad, they are now. And they're a part of some political affiliation or a part of some woke agenda, then we talk about that and we discuss it in front of the community. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. We even discuss it on the khutbah because we have young boys and girls that need an out from, to them, the stringency of Islam. And so that's not considered backbiting, right? What about scholars and sheikhs that speak publicly? Yeah, that's true. It's not backbiting if a sheikh that you know of, or a sheikha, or ustad, or ustada, that has a public platform, or that says something in the khutbah that is actually haram. There's nothing wrong with raising awareness that, hey, what, first and foremost, talking to the person, what you said was incorrect, or what you said was, from my understanding, haram, and you said this in your khutbah, or whatever the case is. And if the person doubles down, let's say there's a khatib that comes, not even at this masjid, any masjid, and says that Muslims should align with the LGBTQ community to show solidarity with them because Muslims are a minority and the LGBTQ community is a minority. So we should hold hands with their initiative and we should go to their initiatives. They should come to our initiatives to show power and to show strength. What we would tell that person is that you are saying something that is outright haram, and that's not going to happen. That's not considered backbiting. And that's not considered slander. It just means that person made a mistake. Maybe that person shouldn't have talked about politics because it's a political game that's being played, and they're just seeing it on a very, sathi, very surface level, and they don't understand what they're saying. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us and forgive the khatib who's giving that type of khutbah. By the way, I'm not saying any khatib or any scholar did this. I'm giving you an example, right? In that case, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, don't follow that portion of the khutbah of what this scholar said. He's completely wrong in this situation. That's not considered backbiting. That's protecting our children and our families and the Muslim community from aligning with the LGBTQ community, which is outright haram. We shouldn't be afraid to say that, no matter who puts pressure on us or what entity or what government puts pressure on us. Cool? Any questions regarding that, the backbiting issue, before we continue, inshallah? It's good? Inshallah. I'm just going to take a sip of water really quick. I've been talking too much. The next is a fiqh question, a great question. Please comment on this. A friend of mine was offering 2 rak'at of sunnah after Maghrib in the mosque. When a newcomer joined him for jama'ah, my friend didn't know what to do, so he was offering the sunnah, and he knew that the newcomer was under the impression that he was offering fard. After the prayer, my friend was still in the mosque, in the masjid, and when the newcomer finished his prayer, he asked my friend why he had not been reading out loud as it was Maghrib. My friend informed him that he had been reading, he was basically praying the sunnah of Maghrib, and therefore could not have read out loud. Could you please clarify with dalil, proof from the hadith or the sunnah, as to what should be done in such a situation? Very good. If someone joins thinking is fard. Okay, so this question actually goes back to intentions and niyyah of prayers. The first question, to give this a backdrop, is the different intentions that take place when an imam is leading, right? So for instance, Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu an, and this is generally what the Shafi'is and the Hanbali schools of thought take from as an evidence that Rasulullah ﷺ used to lead Mu'adh ibn Jabal in the Sahaba in the prayer, and Mu'adh ibn Jabal used to go to his people and lead them in the same prayer. So let's just say, for example, Mu'adh ibn Jabal read Asr, Fard, Salah Muhammad ﷺ, and he would go to his people and lead them in the same prayer. And Rasulullah ﷺ approved of that prayer, which means, think of this, that he prayed Fard, and then he goes to his people who are praying Fard, but for him it's no longer a Fard. It's a Nafil prayer. And he would still lead them in their Fard prayer, and Muhammad ﷺ approved of this, right? So at a general consensus of the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis, that's considered a valid prayer of the Imam and the Muqtadi, the person who's praying behind the Imam, right? And we see that sometimes during Taraweeh, some masjids approve of it based on their fiqh, and some masjids don't approve of it. For instance, if the Imam is praying Taraweeh, and he finished, now this is a different scenario, that he's now praying Taraweeh, and there's no space, let's say, or there is, but you're encouraged to read your fard behind the Imam that's praying Taraweeh. So you haven't prayed Isha yet, you come into the masjid, they're in their 2 raka'at of Taraweeh, first 2 raka'at, they've already finished Isha. So you join yourself with the intention of Isha, but the Imam already started his Taraweeh, so when he's done with the 2 raka'at of Taraweeh, after he says Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, you stand up and finish your 2 raka'at. According to some scholars, right, it's allowed. When I say some scholars, I mean like the Shafi'is and the Hanbalis, it's allowed to pray with ikhtilaf al-niyyah. The niyyah differs, but there's still a jama'ah taking place in the masjid, right? According to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, that if the niyyah is a different niyyah, you're not allowed to pray, because the hadith of Rasulullah is إِنَّمَا جُعِلَ الْإِمَامُ لِيُؤْتَمَّ بِهِ. The Imam was made an Imam for him to be followed, meaning his prayer to be followed. Meaning that if the Imam makes a mistake, he does sajdat sahu and everybody does it with him, right? In the same way that if the Imam has a niyyah, an intention of fard, you can't have ikhtilaf al-niyyah, because any mistakes that you as a follower make in the masjid behind the Imam, it doesn't matter, because the Imam didn't make that mistake, and the Imam makes up for all of your mistakes and all of your shortcomings in the prayer, as by the hadith. So is it a valid difference of opinion? Yes, it's a valid difference of opinion. Should we make an issue about it? No. Are they both following the Quran and the hadith? Yes, they're both following the Quran and the hadith. There's no problem in that. Now comes to the point of what the brother's asking. You guys understood what I was talking about as far as difference of opinion, as far as intention, right? Now he is saying that he finished his prayer. There's 2 scenarios in this. Let's say the same way that we're going to pray Isha now. The Imam finishes Isha, and one of the followers joins late. So Isha begins, the Imam finishes 2 raka'at or 3 raka'at, I come in and I join. And what do I do after the Imam says salam, because I came in late? I stand up to make up a raka'ah, right? Somebody comes in the back now and taps my shoulder, because I stood up now. Everyone else is sitting. And somebody wants to pray fard, but I was late. Am I still praying a fard? Yes, I'm still praying a fard. But am I a follower now? Was I the Imam of that jama'ah? No, I wasn't the Imam. I'm the follower of that jama'ah, but I stood up. So according to this opinion, right, the person would tap the shoulder and you would just continue the prayer as you would. Allahu Akbar, Sami Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana lakal hamd, and that person would follow you, according to the opinion of Imam Shafi'i and Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahumullah, right? Now, if salah is done, everything's finished, and you have, for instance, Muhammad praying sunnah in the back, and somebody taps his shoulder, He's only praying sunnah because that's what the question is referring to, right? Does he continue praying out loudly because the person behind him is praying fard now? That's why this requires a little bit of understanding our deen. When you're praying in the masjid and somebody taps your shoulder, that generally means you have somebody following you and they stand next to you. That means they are expecting you to be imam now. But that is only understood if we understand our deen properly, understand the fiqh of basic ibadat, right? So what does he do? He continues and says Allahu Akbar loudly, Sami Allahu liman hamidah loudly, because the person that's following him now is clearly of the opinion that he's praying fard. I'll give you a small example. When I was in Egypt, I knew a brother who wasn't used to this, and that's totally fine. He's not used to this. He grew up in this very small community in the States, and he didn't even know that this difference of opinion existed. He's praying sunnah, and somebody who hasn't prayed fard yet tapped his shoulder and moved next to him. And that person just kept on moving to the side. He's like, oh, I don't know what this person's doing. Does he want me to move? Maybe he wants me to move out of the way because he's trying to pray. So he kept on moving, and then he's moving in different directions. And when he was done with his prayer, there was a dispute now. Not a bad dispute, like, hey, why'd you keep tapping my shoulder? And the other person's like, hey, why didn't you lead me in prayer? Right? Because that person grew up in the madhab of Imam Shafi'i, where he grew up in Egypt, and that's normal practice in Egypt. You go to Egypt, it's very normal. When the imam says salam, salam, you hear somebody reading loudly, for instance, or you see a jama'ah behind him now. And when that person finishes, somebody else comes late, another jama'ah joins that person. It's very normal in many countries. But in some countries, it's not normal. For instance, in India, Pakistan, in Uzbekistan, in areas, of, what's behind the Euphrates River, of generally people who are Hanafi, that's not a general practice because it's not in the fiqh of Imam Abu Hanifa, which is fine. Everything is learning experience in our deen, right? If I didn't know, now I know. That's all it is in our deen. If I didn't know somebody practiced Islam that way based on fiqh, based on the Quran and Hadith of what Imam Shafi'i and Ahmad Hanbal follow, guess what? Now I know. Who cares? I mean, it's beautiful. You learn something new, right? It's still a part of our deen, and it's still a part of our tradition. So that's all it is. If you didn't know, now you know. So if somebody taps your shoulder, they're expecting you to be the imam now. And many masjids that don't follow that, there's still some masjids. Look, there's something that we have to understand also about many fiqhs. In the fiqh of Imam Abu Hanifa, and if the masjid is generally following the madhab of Imam Abu Hanifa, the imam is Hanafi, the timings that they're following are Hanafi, the iqamah is Hanafi, like repeating everything twice, no problem, alhamdulillah. But don't expect there to be a second jama'ah, because according to Imam Abu Hanifa, there's no, after the jama'ah, which is the jama'ah, which is fard, that the imam leads, there's no jama'ah in the masjid after that for that prayer. Right? So, if you go to a masjid and the jama'ah of Salat al-Maghrib, for instance, is finished, the newcomers that come in, they're going to pray individually, or sometimes there's another room allotted to them where they can pray jama'ah, but they're not going to pray in the Salat al-Jami'ah, in the jama'ah where the masjid is, where the imam leads. And there's many wisdoms in that, and that's the fiqh of Imam Abu Hanifa, right? And you're going to find that sometimes people, they don't know that, they come, they're traveling, they're travelers. That's why you have to have rahmah. They're travelers, they find a masjid, they just Google a masjid, they go and pray, and they form a jama'ah, and next thing you know, people are like, hey, what are these people doing? They're forming another jama'ah. No, we have to wait for them to finish, have rahmah, explain it to them, have an understanding that maybe they're abir sabil, maybe they're just travelers and they don't know, we've never seen them. We have to have that rahmah in our heart too, right? But the reason why I mentioned all of that is that we have to be able to understand that the fiqh that I follow, other people practice other fiqh that are based on the Quran and the Hadith of Rasulullah and the ijma' of the Sahaba and the practice of the Sahaba and the qiyas of the fuqaha of this ummah. There's many, many people who follow different fiqhs. And dare I say that there's people in this world that don't practice only just the four madahib, right? I'm talking about the madahib of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, right? There's other people that practice the fiqh of Imam Ibn Hazm, rahimahullah, right? There's other people that practice the fiqh of his teacher, Abu Dawud al-Zahiri, right? And there's some people who practice the fiqh of, they attribute themselves to the madhab of the Salafiyya, right? But they're also, I mean, in essence, they're a branch of the Hanbali madhab, right? And they attribute themselves to Ibn Hazm generally and Ahmad ibn Hanbal. But nonetheless, we have in normative Sunni Islam, madhabs that are not just the four madhabs that I mentioned, right? And some of those madhabs existed in the Ummah and then they just went away, right? That were still Sunni Islam. So we have to be very, very understanding. Now, I'm not saying that we have an imam now that happens to be from some of the denominations of the Shi'as and comes and leads in our masjid. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that. That's why I said within this normative Sunni Islam, right? You know, Allahu alam. Jazakumullahu khairan for that question.
Sorry.
Yes, sir.
I just want to add something.
Bismillah.
Do you have to have do you have to follow a madhab?
Very good. I just shed a little bit of light on that before, but I'm glad you asked that question because we do still have some time. Do you have to follow a madhab? And I'll tell you why I'm going to give you a long-winded answer. The short answer is no. But there's a connotation and a backdrop to that, right? No, the reason why I said no is that the layperson who's not a specialist in fiqh actually doesn't have a madhab, no matter what he says. He can say that I'm Hanafi, I'm Shafi'i, I'm Hanbali, but if it's a layperson who's not a specialist in Islam, actually doesn't have a madhab. The maxim of the Sharia, the axiom that we have in the Sharia is al-ammi la madhab lahu. The ammi, the layperson, doesn't actually have a madhab. He can study under a madhab that's different, right? That's why I said generally no. And I gave that example as if you and I are traveling somewhere and we're not specialists, for instance, in Islam, or somebody who just became Muslim, right? He's just going to go to the masjid, and if he has a question, he's going to ask the scholar that's there. He's not going to ask the scholar, oh wait, are you Hanafi, are you Maliki, are you Shafi, are you Hanbali, which one are you? No, he's just going to say, what does Allah want me to do? What am I supposed to do? The scholar is going to tell him, he doesn't even have to tell him what madhab. He's just going to tell him, and that's what he follows. That is his madhab. So somebody who's a non-specialist in Islam, that's why it's a great question. Somebody who's a non-specialist in Islam, who's not a jurist in Islam, if they ask somebody of knowledge, because Allah says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. If you don't know, then you ask somebody of knowledge, and that's all you follow. That's it. It doesn't matter. Historically, a madhab means that you're convinced of the usul, meaning the method of extrapolating rules and regulations from the Quran and the Hadith, and you have basically understood that and you've learned that, that means you're of that madhab, right? And it doesn't mean that that person who's of a madhab wouldn't follow another madhab temporarily, right? We know that from the scholars of the past, even from the people of the madhab themselves, when they would go into the land, when Imam al-Shafi'i prayed in the area of the students of Imam Abu Hanifa, he prayed like Imam Abu Hanifa, out of respect for the students of Imam Abu Hanifa. Was he doing something haram? No, not at all. He knew that Imam Abu Hanifa was following to the Quran and Sunnah of his understanding of the Quran and Sunnah, because there's many ways of looking at the Quran and Sunnah. There's not just one way. And we can explain that too. I know you guys didn't ask for that, but out of respect he did, and vice versa, right? And Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Hazm in their own writing said that if somebody goes to a place that's Maliki and they're not themselves Maliki, they should pray like the Malikis, especially if they make you the Imam. Why? Because that's what the people are used to. And let's just say that you make a mistake according to your own madhab in salah, but it's not a mistake to the other madhab. You're doing sajdat as-sahw and they don't know why you're doing sajdat as-sahw. Which is why the Imam is supposed to be someone who's learned in Islamic knowledge. The Imam has to understand Islam pretty well. And in Islamic history, the Imam, when he used to lead, the people that prayed behind him were the people of knowledge. Yes, dare I say they had reserved seating in the masjid. Why? Because the people of knowledge that were reserved, standing behind the imam, if the imam had to leave prayer, they used to know what to do if the imam has to leave and do istikhlaf. There's a concept of istikhlaf in the salah. That let's just say the imam's praying and he breaks his wudu while he's praying. What is he supposed to do? How is he supposed to do it? Right? Pilot, co-pilot, Jazakallah khairan. President, vice president, right? He holds him by the wrist and he moves him forward. Right? And that imam knows, like if let's just say that the person is praying behind me and they don't know anything about Islam. And I'm not saying don't stand behind the imam. I'm just saying in Islamic practice what used to happen. In some places in the Muslim world it still happens. That if he doesn't know how to read Quran properly, let's say he's standing right behind the imam and the imam does istikhlaf of him. Let's say that he just recently became Muslim. And then that person, let's say he's been Muslim for a while or he's been born Muslim, oh, do I continue where the imam left off? Or do I say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and just continue from somewhere else, right? All that stuff has to be understood, which is why the people of knowledge are generally behind the imam. But to answer your question, all of this is an offshoot of understanding that the layperson actually doesn't have a madhab, no matter what they say. Because they don't understand what a jurist understands. But is it good, obviously, to once you start studying a madhab, like I'm going to be a talib al-ilm now, I'm going to be a seeker of knowledge, and I'm going to study the madhab of Ahmad ibn Hanbal now, for instance. Once you start that path, you begin and you stick to that madhab. Why? Because as the weakness that we have, and I'll give you a small example, and I give this example to people all the time. You see this with students of knowledge all the time. They go and go and buy books. One of the things that students of knowledge, their entertainment is amongst their friends, is they go and they get up some money whenever they get money or they get paid, especially if they're overseas. Books are a lot cheaper over there. What do? They go after Jummah and they go buy a whole bunch of books. They spend their money on books, right? They eat very simple food and ta'miyah if they're in Egypt, right? And very, very simple food. And they save up their money to buy books once a week or once a month after Jummah because Jummah is celebratory. And the students are generally off on Jummah. But guess what? How shaitan does waswas with them when they buy multiple books. What do you think? What do you think happens? Let's just say I go and I buy 10 different books that I've been waiting to be released, that I've been waiting to be dropped. The drop happened. It's been released. What do you think? How would shaitan do waswas with 10 new books that this person was anticipating that he was saving up for? How would it happen? I have 10 books now. It's after Jummah. I ate with the brothers that are students just like me, and now I have all these books in my room now. What am I going to do?
You have plenty of time. You can read later.
You have plenty of time, you can read later. That's one. What else? Or you what? Show off your books? Yeah, you're right. Very true. Guys, look what I got. Right? What else? Think. What else? I'm not saying these are wrong. Just very true. But how does shaitan actually do waswas to this person? To riya? Guys, look at these books I have. I can act like I'm reading. I don't understand what's happening. That can happen. Right? Or like, you know what? I got them. I'll take care of it later. Procrastination from shaitan? Procrastinating for sure. But what does shaitan do with the studious talib al-ilm? The seeker of knowledge who loves seeking knowledge. He weaponizes the knowledge in the books against him. How? Sorry, were you raising your hand? No. Oh, he weaponizes it. How? First, that's true. That's going to come later, but we're going to hold on to that one. I'm going to open one book, and I'm going to be like, man, I should be reading. Actually, I should be reading that. Then he goes to the other book. Man, you know what? I should be reading that instead. Reads that. He's only gotten 5 to 10 minutes into each book. Right? At the end of 2 hours, he's burnt out. Like, oh, man, I did a lot of reading. He actually didn't do anything.
Confused.
I'm sorry?
Confused.
He can't, very confused. He can't choose, but shaitan made him busy with other things and whispering to other things and other things and other things. And that's how sneaky shaitan is. When Allah says that shaitan is your open enemy, shaitan will convince you there's an act of worship here in studies that's better than this one, and he'll confuse you. After 2 hours, you're burnt out. You don't even want to touch those books now. That's what happens with fiqh. That a student of knowledge, when they begin, they start researching and they're like, you know what, I want to expand to other madhahib and other madhabs and other. And at the end of him, when he just first starts, within the first week, he's flustered and confused, oh my God. Or even later on, a few months later, it's like, oh my God, I don't know what to choose. There's so many options, right? It's like a child in a candy store that his dad gave him $10 in a dollar store, right? He doesn't know what to get, and he blows everything off. The same thing is once you start a madhab, stick to the madhab, stick to the madhab, stick to the madhab, as long as it's within Sunni Islam, right? I hope I answered your question. Jazakallah khairan, brother.
Sheikh, in normally month of Ramadan, well, without Imam is Shafi, some people, because they are praying 2 plus 1.
In witr, yes.
Shafi without 2 plus 1.
Yes.
Hanaf 3 continuous.
3 and 1, yes.
So many people they use the Jama'ah just praying separately. Is it correct?
Very good. That's a great question. That's a 3-part question. 3-part is, number 1 is there's multiple ways of praying witr. And witr just means odd number. You can pray 3, 5, 7 rak'at in witr, actually. And some ways of praying witr, according to some of the Hanbalis, is that there's no jalsa. There's just all 3, and then the third one there's a jalsa, right? No, 3 all together at one. 3 individual, 3 all together, or 2, yes, yeah, or just 1. Someone can just stand up and pray 1 rak'ah of witr, right? Just 1 rak'ah and that's it, of witr. No 3, just 1, because it's witr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says witr, right? Because the 2 are actually sunnah. That's why Imam Abu Hanifa differentiates. When Imam Abu Hanifa differentiates 2 and 1, the witr is that last third rak'ah. The odd one. The odd one. The first 2 are sunnah, even according to Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, right?
So, I guess it goes back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he read 1 witr, 1 salah, 1 rak'ah,
1 rak'ah,
considering it to be witr.
considering it to be witr. Jazakallahu khairan.
Salah that starts after midnight till
Yes, sir. Yes, and you can attach it, in the qunut, like according to the Malikis and Shafi'is, can be read in Salat al-Fajr, according to the Malikis. No, after Fajr, during the fard, the witr, the qunut itself, not the witr, I'm sorry, the qunut which is inside the witr. So, but check this out. So the first part is there's multiple ways of praying Salat al-Witr. There's not just 2, there's many. Let's just say there's 5, at least, right? Ways of praying witr. The second portion is that people leaving. Now, some people may leave, right, because they want to pray witr before Salat al-Fajr, so they leave, not evading the fiqhi difference of opinion of praying 2 and 1, 2 plus 1, as you said, but rather they said, you know what, I want to go home, I want to eat, I want to go to sleep, pray tahajjud, wake up and pray witr in the masjid or at home, and then come, right? Which there's a whole different level of ajr for that, especially in Ramadan, right? So we have to be understanding about that. The third portion is that, let's just say that I follow the madhab Imam Abu Hanifa and somebody is praying witr according to the madhab Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal or Imam Shafi'i, which is 2 rak'at, giving salam, assalamu alaikum rahmatullah, assalamu alaikum rahmatullah, standing up and praying 1 witr. In situations like this, especially if you're in the masjid and there's a jama'ah and you did your niyyah according to the imam, because the hadith of Rasulullah is إِنَّمَا جُعِلَ الْإِمَامُ لِيُؤْتَمَّ بِهِ. The imam was made to be followed, meaning everything he does is the salah of the muqtadi. That doesn't matter. So the beautiful thing about our deen is the madhab doesn't matter according to what the imam is reading anymore, as long, again, I know I'm stressing this, I know you guys already know this, but just to be very, very careful, as long as it is an acceptable madhab within Sunni Islam. That's the most important thing. But the reason why this is very important, I'm so glad, Uncle, that you brought this up. Very, very important point. Do you know that in Islamic history, sometimes, we've heard from different parts of the world this hatred or animosity for madhabs. Muqallid, ghayr muqallid. Do you know that comes from a historical place? That comes from a historical place, if we see of how fiqh evolved. There was a time in the haram where there were 4 different jama'ats happening in the same time because of people's madhab, and their adherence to the madhab was so strong that it overrode the unity of the Muslims in the Haram. I'm talking about in Mecca, where they used to pray 4 salahs at the same time in different corners, in different parts. This was actually according to maybe around the time of the till of Imam al-Nawawi. This was actually why Imam Ibn Taymiyyah's time. I can't remember the exact year. The reason why Imam Ibn Taymiyyah said that madhabs for now are haram is because of this very reason. But it was only for that time and place, because of the fitna that the madhabs had caused. The madhabs aren't meant to cause a fitna that you're praying 4 jama'ahs. It's haram to pray more than 1 jama'ah, even in any masjid. If I was to pray a jama'ah here, let's say I'm leading and this brother's leading another jama'ah behind me at the same time, that is outright haram, unacceptable in any masjid in the world. From Rasulullah's time to Yawm al-Qiyamah. So imagine it happening in the haram. In the haram, right? Yeah, so in Mecca, al-Mukarramah, right? So that would be very, very problematic. So the madhabs are not supposed to bring us to that level. And any scent of that historical thing happening in the madhab causing that in any masjid, we nullify that, which is why no matter what the imam of the haram, his madhab is, it doesn't matter. He's leading the salah, and Muhammad ﷺ said that the imam is meant to lead the people of what he prays, then everybody else's salah is legit. Everybody else's salah is an act of worship. Everybody else's fard is accomplished. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is happy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not happy for sure that if we have 4 different salahs happening in a masjid at the same time, or 2 because of fiqhi differences of opinion. So to answer your question, yes, that person's salah, the 2 plus 1, is allowed in Islam because the imam is meant to lead the people, right? As long as he's in normative Sunni Islam.
Whatever imam you're praying behind,
You're good, as long as he's Sunni.
you don't like, if he's a Shafi'i, I don't turn to a Shafi'i. I can read behind him and I'll be good.
Of course, it'll be good. And
If I'm the imam myself, then whatever I am, let's say if I'm a Hanafi, then
everybody who's praying behind you, everyone's fine, no matter what their madhab is.
stick to my Hanafi thing, right?
Yeah, if you want to. Yes, if that's what you're used to. If that's what you're used to, I already cut you off. That's what you're used to, right? You're really not, everybody else has to follow suit. No problem. We're Muslims. We're all praying for the sake of Allah.
You don't have to skip, okay, today, Monday is going to be Maliki, Tuesday.
No, you don't have to do that.
It's going to be, what's on the menu today?
No. Allah's not asking us to complicate that. That's a great question.
People that actually think
Yeah. No, that's not necessary.
go back and forth, take the step, okay, Shafi'i, I don't have to pay zakat on personal gold.
Yeah.
So I'll just take what I like from Shafi'i.
You're right.
And I'll take a little bit what I like from Hanafi, and I'll take a little bit what I like from maybe the
Yeah.
Salafi,
Yes,
the
yes.
Salafi, and then kind of like make my own madhab.
That's where you
Make my
Buffet.
own- Make my
Yeah.
own madhab.
Buffet. Yeah.
And imagine what this is. I spoke to. I was sitting. This is a really topic that's worth. It needs justice.
Yeah.
Just to remove the darknesses which surround this topic.
Yeah.
So he said that all of the madhahib they take you to the Prophet.
Yeah,
And
sallallahu alaihi
the
wasallam.
Prophet sallallahu
Yeah.
alaihi wasallam, right? So how can we be wrong? As
Yeah.
long as these people were sincere and their works is all backed up by hadith and Quran. Right?
Yeah.
And you have
Yeah.
strong chains of narration.
Yeah. No, that's why it's important. Look, if the imam of the masjid is leading a people, and that's the madhab that he follows. Remember, I just want to clarify what a madhab is. A madhab means that the specialist that follows that madhab adheres to how the Quran and the Sunnah or the Hadith was applied in this situation. That's what a madhab actually is, right? So, yes.
If the imam is leading the prayers and he loses the wuzu, what about the jamaat?
Yes. So what he does is he does istikhlaf. Istikhlaf means that he brings somebody behind him to lead the prayer. Or in some madhabs, he can go and do wudu and come back and do bina. That's known as bina, where he builds off. In the Arabic language, bina means to build, right? Over here, al-bina in salah means that you go, you do wudu, and then you come back and then you finish where you left off. Without talking, jazakallah khairan, without talking to anybody and without doing anything, yes.
They're all sajda.
They're going to be waiting for him. No, it's happened before. Yeah, no, it can happen. But that's why it's good to lead somebody, bring somebody in leading. And if you're in sajda, you would tap somebody on the shoulder and say, Al-Imam, or Al-Imama, or Istikhlaf Al-Imam. But that's why the people who are behind the Imam should have some knowledge, basic, well-rounded knowledge of Islam, right? That's why I mentioned in Islamic history that the scholars used to be behind the Imam for that reason. Not because we believe all scholars are more valuable as far as human matter is concerned. No, it's because that's necessary and that's very, very important for that person to be there. Can somebody remind me, I'm forgetting what the new timings for the adhan are.
8:30.
8:30 is adhan.
Adhan was at 7:54.
Time, okay, for adhan,
7:54.
7:54?
Yeah, that's when Adhan was 7:54.
Okay, so if we can stop now and somebody can give adhan, so we have time for everyone to get ready for Salat al-Isha, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us. Can we do it after Salah, inshallah, if you don't mind?
Okay.
I'm so sorry, uncle. Or after he gives the adhan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa akhir da'wan. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. هيا على الصلاة. هيا على الصلاة. هيا على الفلاح. هيا على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا